opportunity here to provide leadership, support, and a voice to the voiceless. The sacrifices that we made during our service do not end here. We carry on. We push forward, and we give hope and inspiration through love, community, and support. Stay free.
Rights and freedoms in this country are absolutely everything to me, because I personally know the sacrifice required in order to get them back once they're gone. So when my brothers and sisters call Stand 2, be sure I'll be there.
Legacy media will play their games, right? Like, this isn't about this or that. This is about freedom, period.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Brothers and sisters in uniform, whether you're a police officer, military, check your hearts. Look where we're going. Man, wake up. I beg you.
If the veterans can't stand up and get a message across to the government, I don't know who can. I don't know. But we're going to give it our best shot. And I think we have a chance to win this and do it. But we need your help. And we need you to come, and we need you to stand too. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk again soon.
yes, they rob and sold out to the merchant shelves. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, my head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Good evening, troops. Jeff Evely, the Magnanimous GenX'er Male, back with you now on this 9th day of April 2024, and I practice radical candor. First one on the board this evening is Patricia. Says, good evening, everyone. Hey, Patricia, thanks for always being with us. Andrew is here saying, good evening, Sergeant Major Evely. Good evening, troops. // share, share, share. Thank you very much for the top cover, as always, and please do, folks. I am the worst guy for not sharing my own stuff. So we got to get the word out there. Smash that like button while you're at it. And Carrie says, afternoon, everyone. Afternoon to you, Carrie. And Andrew says, good evening to Patricia. Okay. Brenda says, good evening, all. And she's giving us a smiley face in the // Thomas is saying, hello, brothers and sisters. Colleen says, good evening, freedom lovers. Cindy says, evening, Jeff Hertz, enjoying a wonderful steak for dinner and a show. Nice. Well, yeah, okay. I think the new time slot seems to be working out, I think so. I'm glad. And let's see, Marion says, good evening, all. And Cora says, hello, all. Evelyn says, hello, all. And here's Jamie saying, good evening. All right, good evening to everybody over on Rumble. We got Dwayne, first one up on the board, says, evening, Jeff and folks. And Chris Freestone is with us, ladies and gentlemen, giving us the triple slashy. Mavcon also giving us the triple slashy. All right, folks, thanks for being with us. I'm going to go ahead and dive into this sucker. Here is our quote for this evening. This is Winston Churchill. This is going to be a heck of an episode. And this is Winston Churchill, and he says, quote, individual Muslims may show splendid qualities, but the influence of the religion paralyzes the social development of those who follow it. No stronger retrograde force exists in the world. Close quote. And that is Winston Churchill, folks. So prime minister during the Second World War, obviously. And he led on the battlefields of World War I. And this is part of the collective amnesia. I think this demonstrates this collective amnesia that we all have when it comes to the fact that the world is a dangerous place. So the Ottoman Empire, which was the last caliphate, I mean, until ISIS, really, but we didn't recognize their statehood. But the Ottoman Empire was the last caliphate, as in, a state that's under Islamic law or Sharia. And the Ottoman Empire entered the First World War on the side of the Axis powers by declaring war on all of Christendom. And nobody who was around during the First World War is with us anymore. So it seems that we tend to not take the lessons of history, I think, because a human lifetime is just not long enough to pass them on in the most ideal of fashions. Okay, and here is our meme for the day. This comes courtesy of our guest Rob Krause. I'll bring him in here in a second, and he sent this over to me. It says, this happened on October 7th, 2023. Since then, the baboon has been begging for a ceasefire. And here we have a picture of a baboon with a stick, and he's sneaking up on a sleeping lion. Fair comment, I guess. All right, I have some other stuff. I have some stuff I want to throw in here too. I'm bringing Rob in because he is quite knowledgeable when it comes to political Islam and the threat of global jihad. And so, we've been meaning to do this for a while. And also, I've been talking about Islamunism quite a bit. I mean, I just made that up, but that seems to be what's happening in Canada right now. Is the communists are marching, hammer in sickle with the political Islamists in the streets. And I've been talking a lot about the intersectional hierarchy and how all of these movements are part of the broader progressive movement, which is a movement that seeks to destroy the West. And so they're joining forces in the perpetual evolution or revolution that would result, I guess. But I'm going to throw in a little bit about that as we go on too. I think I'll go ahead and bring Rob in here now. Rob, how you doing, brother? Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. It's good to finally get on a stream with you.
Yeah, you're telling me. And Rob has been helping out with a lot of this stuff too. He's like I said, he's kind of a font of information when it comes to this subject in particular. And Rob, you have a bit of a backstory too with respect to your release from the military. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, sure. I first got interested in the subject of political Islam about the time that M103 came through the Canadian Parliament. And it was a few months after. And then I just went down the rabbit hole thanks to our V4F intelligence officer, Mr. Tom Quiggin. Yeah. And from there, it started sharing things on social media, much to the Navy's chagrin. And they put Queen's Regulation and Order 19.14 on me, which basically says that military members are not allowed to say things that the military doesn't like in public. Mm-hmm. And it eventually had me reduced in rank from petty officer second class to leading seaman. Wow. For the Army types, that's sergeant to corporal. And at the same time, of course, they were doing the administrative side on me. And it got all the way up to C&P, and they decided I had breached that. and I was released 5F just for sharing the truth about, the Canadian government, political Islam, and the Black Lives Matters movement on social media. And at the same time, they were trying to kick me out for. At the same time, they had already started the procedures to kick me out 5F for refusing CDS Directive 002 on the vaccine, but the other events beat them to it.
Gotcha. And QRNO 1914, by the way, folks, is the one on improper comments. And if memory serves, it says that no officer, member of, or non-commissioned member of the Canadian Armed Forces shall say anything that, if heard by a member of the public, could reflect discredit on the CAF. It's something like that. The could is the real open-endedness that really demonstrates the open-endedness of it. It's wide open to interpretation. And that was what the Halifax Five were charged under as well, when they went out on Canada Day and said, we happen to think that Canada is a pretty great country to live in. And that was because they said it to some demonstrators who were Indigenous and doing a mock teardown, I guess, of the statue of Cornwallis in Halifax, and those guys ended up being charged under 1914 as well. It is kind of the one that is like, we don't like what you said, and I could have got hit with that too, Rob, just for
And James Topp was hit with that too.
Media. Yeah, that's right. That is the one that James Topp was charged under. That's right. They can kind of get you with anything you do. They can kind of get you with that one. Yeah, I shared a lot too, like all through the 2010s and everything. I got interested in this subject 2009, I guess. It was really just the case that I was deploying to Afghanistan, and so I was trying to learn a little bit about what was happening with the whole thing and get a little better understanding of what was going on in the world. And so I started looking into Islam a little bit, and holy smokes, what a rabbit hole.
It goes deep.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that some of this curiosity was bolstered by Tom Quiggin as well.
Yeah, it was Tom Quiggin, and then I ended up discovering Dr. Bill Warner, Jay Smith, and Apostate Prophet, One Godless Woman, with David Wood, all of the infamous names in the counter Dawa movement.
Nice. You got your terminology down. And I'm a bit rusty on this. I've been a little bit more consumed with other things in recent years, especially communism, wokeism. Like I kind of right away, I was going, yeah, this is not good. I got interested in Marxism, I guess, in the mid 2000s. And third wave feminism was kind of my watershed for that. When I found out, like I realized that it was a Marxist movement, and that led to all kinds of other things. But anyway, yeah, the political Islam component of it seems to have joined forces with the Marxists now, and we're under threat of Islamunism, I guess, at this point. I wanted to,
yeah, and I don't know if you see it in there, but Colleen has asked a question there. Why has Tom Q gone silent? And that is mostly because the Islamist lobby in Canada has decided that he was getting too close to the truth. And because the Sharia definition of slander is anything said about a Muslim that they do not like. It doesn't have to be a lie about them. It can be 100% the truth. It does not have to damage them financially or reputational damage. They just do not have to like it. And because of that, and their skill at playing the victim, and of course, we're talking strategic lawsuit against public participation and lawfare, which they're experts on using all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. The lobby and the lawfare are really strong here in Canada. And I think he got sued by the NCCM, actually. And we're talking about Tom Q, but the comment was Tom M. And Tom M,
Oh.
as far as I know, Morazzo is not quiet. He's still in the chats. He's not quiet in there, that's for sure. And he's still on Twitter and stuff. But Tom Q, I think, is what we heard. And anyway, he has done a lot of work on that, and he's actually a published author on this subject. So he's got a book out there. I should have lined that up. Do you know what the book is called? Tom's book on political Islam?
Tom Quiggin's book?
Yeah.
Or Tom Morazzo? Tom Quiggin's book is called Submission, The Danger of Political Islam to Canada with a Warning to America.
Right on. Submission. Okay. That's
Submission,
another one I
yeah.
got to read.
I own
got
a copy
really
of
long
that.
reading list. Now, I wanted to start something off here because one of the things, of course, you mentioned M103 and the Islamophobia narrative, and it's very much, I think, akin to the racist narrative. And often, I think, with how people are reacting when you criticize Islam, like Islam, when I'm talking about it, is a doctrine. It's a body of thought, right? Like these are ideas that I'm being critical of. And what's often, I think, the reaction is, people react to these criticisms as if they were racism. But Islam is not a race. It's not an ethnicity. It's nothing like that. It's an ideology. And which race am I being racist towards exactly? Is it Indonesians? Because that would be the most populous Muslim country in the world. And of course, like regular watchers know that I have had Muslims on this program before, and I have worked with Muslims in the freedom movement and so on and so forth. So it's not a matter. It's kind of like, Winston Churchill said, like individuals are capable of great things and being really decent people, but there are some alarming trends, I think, that we see, in the Islamic world. So the reaction that we see when we start to talk about this is that people tend to react to it as if it were racism. So I wanted to throw to this first. I'm going to talk a little bit. We're going to try and get these two kind of movements that we can see are combining forces at this particular moment. And I wanted to kind of dive into why that is a little bit. I've been talking about it quite a bit here and there, but here is a report from Unconstrained Analytics. They're friends of the program. Stephen Coughlin, he was an intelligence officer who briefed the J1. He worked at the J1. What's intelligence? I'm losing my it's not one. It's 1 and 6.
J3.
3. It is 3. Yeah, it's J3. I was kind of brain farting there for a second. J4 is logistics and J6 is communications. Okay, so anyway, the J3 is Steve Coughlin, essentially, and he briefs the Joint Chiefs on all kinds of stuff. And he has a great website called Unconstrained Analytics where he does all these reports and he puts them up there for free. And this one is called A Warning on Racism. And I'm just going to read like a tiny little bit here. He gets into some of the different stuff. Just interesting quotes initially, but I think I lost my highlight here because it looks like it's right here. Okay, so I'm just going to read a few paragraphs here to kind of whet your appetite. It says, and this was published just prior to the 2020 election. This is from November 2nd, 2019. And so here it says, there are indicators that the left will initiate a strategic information effort leveraging the full range of political warfare activities to delegitimize the United States. The effort will pivot off the upcoming election cycle and include intimidation and violence. Of course, we saw that in 2020, the election. And it says, last February, Unconstrained Analytics published a report, Re-Remembering the Misremembered Left, the Left's Strategy and Tactics to Transform America. It argues that the left operates dialectically through weaponized attack narratives to destroy identity. It accomplishes this objective through targeted negation campaigns that seek the denial of individual, social, and national identity. Post-nation state. The negation process conditions the domestic populations to accept and even support violence, integrates nonviolent actions to enhance effects, and shapes enduring perceptions in support of planned end states. It is a process that anticipates domestic terrorism. As it relates to this assessment, the target is all things American. And that would include Canadian too. I think this would you could broaden that to the West, but America is targeted with the most vitriol because it is the only thing standing in the way of global tyranny. Says at its core, it is Marxist, and I'm not sure if you can hear that. Do you hear that ringing?
Oh, I hear that.
Yeah, I think. Okay, sorry about that. Somebody's trying to call me on Signal. I should have closed that out. Okay. Okay, it is Marxist. Possibly in preparation for the upcoming election cycle, these narratives are escalating in frequency and intensity. As they escalate, intimidation and violence will be integrated into the narratives by design. As such, recent events can be understood to reflect the opening phase of an information campaign designed to sculpt the information battle space for future planned operations through preparations resembling operational preparation of the environment, activities normally associated with special operations. This assessment will focus on the quote-unquote racism line of effort, LOE. As appropriated by the left, the quote-unquote racism, LOE, seeks to define all things American as quote-unquote racist in furtherance of delegitimizing all things American. It does this, for example, by designating all things American as quote-unquote white nationalism, white supremacy, white privilege, etc., and therefore racist. The end state is the suppression of all speech that promotes or defends America by designating all things American as racist. These narratives escalate by design. To recognize their arc and trajectory, it is necessary to understand the roles they play in political warfare regimes. Okay, that's good for that one there, but please go and check out the website. This is another report from Unconstrained Analytics. And this one is a little bit longer. This is the left's strategy and tactics to transform America. And I have a section highlighted down here that I wanted to just read for you guys as soon as I find it again. Oh, it's here. Okay.
So the leftists
says,
and Islamists have always been traditional allies because they both want the same thing. They want to see the end of Western democracy. And that red-green alliance, as it's known, has been very powerful. And we're seeing it again today.
Yeah, 1,000%. And here in this section here, this is the left's strategy to destroy America. And I just have a couple of paragraphs from it here. For our current discussion. It says, as the discussion on social grievances proceeds, it should be recognized that the groups identified below seek to secure privilege for the quote-unquote other that are granted to them by the state, which necessarily replaces an individual's inalienable rights, which the Bill of Rights has written to safeguard. By design, the otherists' group rights depend on status concepts of the state advanced by Hegel to negate rights endowed by the Creator. Consider how some state bars, like the Minnesota State Bar, condition the rendition of an attorney's right to practice law on his or her taking, quote unquote, bias, continuing legal education courses that, through practice, position group rights as the pinnacle of rights. Seamlessly integrated into a political warfare execution matrix, this Marcuse's repressive. Okay, before I read that part, they mentioned Hegel here. And, think Hegelian dialectic, right? The problem, reaction, solution. The thing about Hegel, though, is he was speaking descriptively as, trying to describe the cycle of history, as one through this kind of perpetual revolution of problem, reaction, solution. And Marx kind of took that to the next level, where now he's advocating for this destruction of civilizations through revolution, and you end up with the perpetual revolution, just the same. The next paragraph here says, seamlessly integrated into a political warfare execution matrix, this is Marcuse's repressive tolerance seeking the complete destruction of a culture, America, through negation process. Aufheben. That is the motto of the Frankfurt School, Aufheben der Culture. And the Frankfurt guys were all kicked out of Germany by the Nazis. Marcuse would be one of them, and he ended up in America. So, and pushing the same stuff, the same commie BS of critical theory. And Aufheben der Culture means destroy their culture. And they're talking about the negation of culture that we're going to get into here in a second. Last little bit here says Marx's critical philosophy through the efforts of a skilled, nihilistically committed. Okay, I can't shut this off. Pardon me, folks.
It's for you.
Yeah.
So I'll continue on here. We
Sure.
actually see that within the Council on American Islamic Relations and
Yeah.
their founding documents, which had said that they will destroy America's evil house from within. So what we've
Yeah.
seen, especially in Canadian politics, is a lot of what they call entryism, where people with their own agenda will they will join established political parties and then steer that political party's platform for their own needs. And Iqra Khalid is a prime
Yeah.
example of that.
Yeah, 1,000%. And Iqra Khalid is the one who introduced Motion 103, folks, to condemn Islamophobia in order to chill the kind of speech that we're having right now. And a little bit here, I'm just going to read this last little bit here. It's on the Marcuse point here, the negation process that simply applies Marxist critical philosophy through efforts of a skilled, nihilistically committed, antithetical proletariat. So the antithetical is, I think, an important piece here. They're talking about Marcuse's repressive tolerance. That's not just oxymoronic. This is a concept that he developed, the repressive tolerance. It's not just oxymoronic, it's antithetical. And so tolerance, like tolerance becomes intolerance, as we can see. That's what ends up happening. And it's this kind of negation of ideas where, like, basically the whole paradigm is flipped, just like I'm saying all the time. The whole paradigm is flipped because of this repressive tolerance, where the gendered become the oppressor and the genderless are the oppressed, and so it's a lot of this kind of sophistry with the antithetical proletariat. Soft scientism plays a role in structuring pseudoscience in support of pseudo-realities, with intersectionality being among the latest scientized applications of the dialectic to targeted a cultural group. Not really science. These scientized concepts seek to impose a competing cultural cosmology based on the Hegelian notion of higher science. So the intersectionality is something that I talk about all the time too. Basically what they've done here is, I talk about the intersectional hierarchy of oppression, and there's an oppression line or a dominance line where, above the line is the oppressor and below the line is the oppressed. And with intersectionality, what we can do is we can kind of draw a line from the thesis to the antithesis. And like I said, the gendered and the genderless, and that would be one line of antithesis, and you can draw another line between, say, Islam and Christianity, to get which one is Christianity being the oppressed or the oppressor and Islam being the oppressed. And those two lines will intersect at that line of oppression or dominance. And so they are a part of the same proletariat, the antithetical proletariat, who is called to overthrow the bourgeoisie, which of course is all things Western. So that's what we're seeing. And thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about tolerance and everything else, is that you will find that these groups, they preach tolerance about themselves. Then they want you to tolerate their culture, their way of life, their beliefs. But if you say anything opposite and challenge them on it, that's oppressive. And Winston Churchill had another great quote about that. He said, some people's idea of freedom of speech is that they can say anything that they want, but if you say anything back, that's a tragedy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or that's oppressive.
Yeah, that's oppressive.
And
exactly.
If you follow in with how Islam rose in Arabia during the time of Muhammad, that actually corresponds to precisely the way it happened, because while he was in Medina, he was teaching tolerance of himself and his followers, but they themselves were intolerant of everyone else.
Yeah, especially the Jews. There was the well, eventually, I think he wanted to join forces with the Jews initially, and when they turned him down, he got rather irate and expelled them from.
They refused to recognize him as a prophet, and that's what actually caused it all.
Yeah, and there were the Banu Qurayza, which was a village that was massacred. I think Muhammad personally beheaded 600 or 700 men in the village when upon their expulsion. So, and
there were 2 other Jewish tribes as well that his forces wiped right off the face of the earth.
That is my understanding, and they expelled all of the infidels from the Arabian Peninsula after his death. And that was Osama bin Laden's main gripe as well, was that the infidels were allowed on the Arabian Peninsula, like the American military bases.
Yeah, what he was doing was he was trying to justify defensive jihad. And because there's no actual caliph in place, that's all they're allowed to do is defensive.
Right. I think it's like all jihad is considered defensive because there is no caliphate right now. Something like that.
Yeah, and what Osama was doing, he was actually justifying his actions for 9/11.
Yeah. And it started before that. I mean, there was the USS Cole well before that. I think we ignored the warning signs really leading up to 9/11.
Yeah, but also what he did before any of that was he invited people to Islam first. Right. So the path is always you invite them to Islam willingly, and then if they don't willingly submit, then jihad is the next option.
Right. So you mean like he invited the Americans? Is that kind of thing?
He invited the world.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But especially the Americans.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more here on some of this, the critical theory and the Marxism. Again, this is the Unconstrained Analytics guys that I was just talking about. We did a video with them I did a podcast. It was a good 3 hours long. This is just a clip that we did. It's called Understanding the Battlefield, where we clipped together a bunch of different segments from that 3 hour long live stream. I just have it queued up to about 4:38 here to get the part that I want, but here we go.
Critical theory is a neo-Marxist principle that envisions the total dissolution of the existing order through a series of escalating dialectical negations over time. On the street signs, it's cancel culture. Critical theory is Marxism. It's not a version of Marxism. It's not a form of Marxism. Intersectionality isn't something Marxism participates in. That's a very Platonic statement. It is Marxism. Intersectionality is a Marxist term that covers for the dialectical attack process. It is a popular branding that provides an academic veneer, allows it to pass itself off as a science, and supports pseudoscience narratives that conceal hostile intent. Through the systematic negation of targeted cultural, religious, and personal values along critical theory lines of attack, intersectionality is a mechanism of intentional cultural genocide. With America as a repressively tolerant regime, wherever there is an other with a competing value, a negative value, that value will be scored as holding a liberating tolerance that will then be pitted against an American value in a dialectical process of negation. The dialectical process will use the other to generate as many liberating values as there are American values to be negated. To identify as an American, racism will negate this.
If you're just listening, it says on the screen there that patriot is being negated by racist.
Love America, xenophobia will negate this.
There you go. If you're a patriot, you're xenophobic, right?
Secure the border, the rights of the migrants will negate this. Believe the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, fascism will negate this. If American institutions of higher learning were built by immigrants of European stock, white privilege will negate this. If you are biologically male and call yourself a man, genderism will negate that. So you're seeing that this is how it works. What we're talking about is the liquefaction of reality. Every one of these intersectional attacks is an attack on your identity. So those things are what are under a direct attack, so that you are not allowed to identify yourself. It is a total attack on identity. And in theory, once every one of these is taken out, you are whatever we say you are, including if we make you have to say you're that yourself.
There you go. That is the war they are inflicting on our minds right now. And that through that lens of intersectionalism is how we end up with this. If you're just listening, the top panel is Queers for Palestine. They're all lined up with they have the pride flag on one side and the Palestinian flag on the other. And the bottom panel is Chickens for KFC. So that is how that is happening. These are intersectional members of the proletariat, the antithetical proletariat. And as such, they have joined forces to overthrow the bourgeois, which is all things Western and particularly American. Yeah, and here is James Lindsay, folks.
Yeah,
this is another good one. You got a comment there, Rob, before I hit this?
Yeah, what the Queers for Palestine don't realize is that if they were actually in Palestine or Iraq, for that matter, they would be hanging from a construction crane or being tossed off the tallest building in the city. The end result is the same. No. They're both dead.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here's James Lindsay, and he is fantastic when it comes to a lot of this neo-Marxism stuff. Here we go. I don't have that in the stream. One second. Here it is. I got that's like 3 bloopers already. Here we go.
Economic theory. Then what we're doing is we're missing the forest in a very specific way. Is this economic theory?
Sorry,
inequity, right?
Yeah, that's right. What I argued is that if we think of Marxism in a very specific way as this economic theory, then what we're doing is we're missing the forest for the trees. There's kind of a forest of Marxism, and this economic theory is one tree, and critical race theory is another tree, and this trans stuff is a third tree, and there's all these different Marxist theories. And what happened over the last, say, 100 years, or really 50 to 60 years, is that the Marxist ideology adapted itself to the Western context, using identity politics to make its way in, using corporations as its mechanism. So it transformed itself into something that's not recognizable as Marxism, but is in fact Marxism adapted to take over the West from within.
Yeah, it's morphing like a virus. I think that was very, very descriptive in more ways than one. I'm also curious what you might think of a headline like this, published today in the New Yorker, quote, "The rise of Latino white supremacy."
Yeah, so there you go. It's lunacy, and it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't make any sense, and that is the point. I mean, is to derange people and negate their sense of reality.
Yeah, that made me laugh. Identity. Latino white supremacy.
And that brings us to a little something more to the point with respect to the title of this program, which is Islamunism 101. Here is Judith Butler, and this is from a while back, I think, from 7 years ago, it says here on the video. It was uploaded anyway. This, I think something tells you it was like the late 2000s, but anyway, this is Judith Butler. She is a seminal third-wave feminist author, so cultural Marxist, and here she is explaining how Hamas fits into this.
I think, yes, understanding Hamas, Hezbollah as social movements that are progressive, that are on the left, that are part of a global left, is extremely important. That does not stop us from being critical of certain dimensions of both movements. It doesn't stop those of us who are interested in nonviolent politics from raising the question of whether there are other options besides violence. So again, a critical, important engagement. I mean, I certainly think it should be entered into the conversation on the left. I similarly think boycotts and divestment procedures are, again, an essential component of any resistance movement.
And the BDS is what she's talking about there, boycott, divest, and sanction, which is a boycott campaign against Israel. And Judith Butler is Jewish, by the way. So I think, you know what, she's Jewish and she's also boomer female. So I think that goes a long way to explaining how we end up with certain Jewish conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Is that I think what we're seeing is that it's different iterations of the boomer generation at different moments in histories, different, various boomer generations, prophet generational archetype that bring sophistry essentially back into reign. And they tend to be, a lot of the leaders tend to be Jewish, because Jews have the highest IQs of any ethnicity. So that's what I see happening anyway. But here is Mideast Madness, and this is an interesting clip if you want to talk about some intersectionality in the modern left. Here are a couple of young ladies with their head coverings on, and well, they're discussing it. So here we go.
And Canada is a white supremacist colonial project, as is Israel, as is the state of Israel. So I don't even consider myself to be a Canadian, because this is Indigenous land and this land is occupied. So the people who are here, whether they are settlers, we firstly need to educate ourselves about what has happened on this land and what is continuously happening, in order for us to be able to understand what our government, or this government, is doing on abroad and on overseas.
Yeah.
And Canada is a white.
Notice the language, okay? The settler, colonialist, oppressor, all of this stuff. It applies to Israel, I believe, because Israel is a Western nation for all intents and purposes. And of course, the intersectional coalition is aiming to overthrow the West. Israel happens to be a real thorn in its side, because it's the only Western power in the Middle East. And they apply all the same rhetoric to them that they apply to us. So whether you're Canadian or whether you're Israeli, you're an oppressor, settler, colonialist. Sound about right, Rob?
Yeah, and what she's saying is about how she doesn't consider herself to be Canadian falls right in with the tenets of Islam, because they actually turn their face towards Mecca 5 times a day to pray, and their allegiance to Islam forbids them from making friends with Christians or Jews, and that's baked right into the Quran itself.
So I mean, like, strict adherence to these kinds of ideological tenets obviously are quite naturally going to be hostile, I think, toward the West and toward Christianity, right?
Oh yes, and you also have to realize that if those women were saying what they were saying in that interview in an Islamic Sharia country, they would, well, first of all, they wouldn't be even allowed out of the house without their husband's permission, and second of all, they would be beat by their husbands for just the fear of rebellion, and that as well is sanctioned by the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34, if anyone wants to check that out.
Right on. Rob really knows his stuff, chapter and verse here. I cite like 1 or 2, but he's got a lot of them at his fingertips. And here is another piece of evidence that I think supports this assessment. Here, Dr. Eli David is sharing this graphic from a poll that came out a while back. It says, do you think that Jews as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors, or is that a false ideology? And 67% of 18 to 24-year-olds, so 2/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds, believe that the Jews are an oppressor class. So that's what's going on in universities, folks. It's that indoctrination that we've been seeing make its way into the curricula that now has this generation of kind of neo-Marxists marching, in lockstep with the Islamists. And somebody was just asking.
Well,
here
it
over
goes right back to the Red-Green Alliance.
Red green. Do you want to elaborate?
The red green alliance, the red being the communists and the green being the Islamists. That's been a traditional alliance for the last 100 years.
Really?
And especially the 1979 Iranian Revolution. The leftists supported the Islamic mullahs, and once the Shah was disposed, the mullahs took over and jailed all the leftists as political prisoners and had them executed.
Holy crap. That's one of those things, like with the Iranian Revolution, we often talk about that in terms of how the US backed a brutal Shah, and now we're living with the blowback from that. But under the Shah, like, women could go to university and wear skirts and so on and so forth. So maybe it was maybe they were better off under the Shah than they were under the Ayatollah. What do you think?
Yeah, the evil is better than the evil that lurks in the darkness. And Winston Churchill was right. There is no more regressive force in this world than Islam. For those who don't believe time travel exists, Islam will take your country back to the 6th century.
Stephanie is saying, I love this phrase, quote, Islam was right about women. Close quote. Yeah, that's a great way to get leftist heads to explode.
Exactly. Along with hijab is a choice.
Yeah. Okay. And so what we see happening here is the non-Western Islam is being cast as the oppressed group, the proletariat, and of course it's the antithetical proletariat that seeks to overthrow the bourgeoisie, which is the West. So let's get a look at a little history lesson here with respect to oppressor, oppressed, West, and Islam. This is Dr. Bill Warner. I showed this on a previous live stream, but it is worth showing it again. So I just have it queued up to the second here, and I'm going to talk out while this plays. Just one second.
Whenever you're dealing with an apologist for Islam or even a Muslim, and you bring up jihad, almost immediately they kick back to you. Well, what about those terrible crusades? Why, they're the moral justification for jihad. I mean, we're just as bad as they are, so let's not talk about jihad, okay? Let's talk about the Crusades. Well, what I would like to talk about here are facts. And it turns out I sat down and put together some work, and I created a database of some 548 battles that Islam fought, jihad battles against classical civilization. And this aren't even all the battles. It really doesn't say much about Africa and India, Afghanistan and all that. It's primarily battles against the classical civilization of Rome and Greece. So 548 battles is a lot, and it's too much to even comprehend. So I created something which I call a dynamic battle map, in which you have a display of the Mediterranean, and a white dot means that this 20-year period, that's a new battle. So every time the screen changes, it's 20-year period. They then, the colors white turn to red, and so you can see a history. This may seem a little confusing, but I think when you see it, you'll know exactly what I mean. And here it starts. Islam burst out of the Arabian Peninsula and immediately starts attacking the Middle East. And notice that it doesn't take long until they're crossing the Mediterranean and attacking southern France and Spain. Notice something here. Most people think of Islam, they think of Arabs, they think of desert. And yet here we see that Islam is projecting power throughout the Mediterranean. Notice how the little islands of the Mediterranean are getting hammered. The navy of Islam would attack coastal towns, kill, rob, rape, and then take slaves. So this whole battle map, as it unfolds, you're seeing slaves being taken. Over 1 million slaves were taken out of Europe into the Islamic world. That's something you don't think about much, but it's absolutely true. There were over 200 battles fought in Spain alone. And we also see, however, on the East Coast in Turkey, that Islam is trying to break into Europe. Now, what's going to happen is in Spain, this ongoing fight that lasted for 400 years, is the Christians are going to push back the Muslims. But now then what has happened over in the East is that Constantinople has fallen, and now then Eastern Europe is getting hammered. The jihad now comes to Eastern Europe. It's pushed out now of Spain. Northern Africa is now completely Islamic. The Middle East is completely Islamic. This is all jihad, relentless jihad. And why is it so relentless? Well, Muhammad was relentless in his jihad. And these people are good students of Islam, and so it's against the kafir, on and on. It was traditional that when the Sultan came to power, the brand new Sultan, he would immediately try to launch.
I am full of bloopers. Yeah, sorry guys. I didn't put myself back in the stream. I had to let my dog out there. That was silly. Okay. And I think I did that last night too. What I was just saying there, well, I had to pause. I'm so sorry. What we're seeing here is, they came out of Arabia, and they started attacking, like he said, across the Mediterranean almost right away. Eventually, around 1450, Constantinople fell. That was the eastern capital of Christendom, the walls of which had stood for 1100 years. That is now modern day Istanbul. And they continued into East Europe here. Romania kind of held them for a little while with Vlad the Impaler, otherwise known as Dracula. That's who he was impaling, was the invading Muslims. And over here in Spain, you can see they're all over the place. Spain changed hands multiple times. And right there in the 15th century, where you have Constantinople falling, the battle at the gates of Vienna, where they were stopped going into Austria. And that was 1452, I think. And 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue for gold, in search of gold, because they needed to continue funding their military for defense desperately in Spain. So I'll play a couple more minutes of this.
New wars, because he was going to be noted in his Islamic history as to how well he fought against the kafir. So that's what the jihad looked like over that time period, 548 battles. But remember, when you bring up jihad, people want to bring up the Crusades. So I also prepared a dynamic battle map of all the offensive raids of the Crusaders. Let's watch it and make a comparison. And so it begins. The Crusades enter into Turkey and the Middle East. Battles go on, but aren't there far fewer than you thought there might be? And here we go. The last battles are fought, and that is the end of the Crusades. So now then we can talk about some facts. Yes, there were Crusades, but notice they ended centuries ago, and jihad is being practiced today. Jihad has been with us for 1400 years. There is no comparison between jihad and the Crusades, certainly not a moral comparison. And when you're looking at the Crusades, remember, in one sense, all of the Crusades were defensive wars. Why? Well, as we saw on the first jihad map, it was Islam that came out of Arabia and conquered the Middle East, a Christian Middle East. And so the Crusaders were trying to free their Christian brothers and sisters from jihad. So there's no moral comparison at all. The motivation of the Crusaders was to free Christians. The purpose of jihad is to enslave the kafir.
All right. That is about the size of it. So that kind of turns that whole oppressor-oppressed narrative on its head. It has been the case right up until the First World War, when the Ottoman Empire entered on the side of the Axis powers, declaring war on all of Christendom, that Islam has encroached on Christianity and not the other way around. What do you think, Rob?
We also saw that in the Armenian genocide of just before the First World War there, where they were actually crucifying Armenian Christians in the desert. And that is a chapter of history that's been almost erased now. And what Dr. Bill there was talking about, you look at Spain, and the Islamists are trying to take over Spain because there's a passage in the Quran. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but it goes that you are to drive them out from where they drove you out. So because the Spanish drove the Muslims out of Spain, they want to retake it because they once held it. And that's the same reason why they're so passionate about taking over all of Israel, because they once occupied it.
Yes, that's right. I'm familiar with that verse as well. Drive them out where they drove you out. And I think it absolutely applies to Israel as well. And what was the other thing I wanted to say here was, I lost it. Okay, let's we'll
get it later.
Yeah. Okay, and check this out. This is from memory. This is the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas. So this is the Hamas Charter, and I have read it, but I think Rob is probably a little more conversant with it. So Rob, take it away, brother.
So one of the big things there is, if you go to Article 6, they quote a hadith there. So yeah, Article 6.
Okay.
At the end of that hadith, or at the end of the article, they quote a hadith. And for those who wish to know, it's Sahih Muslim 2922. And it's talking about the end times, where they say that the end times will not come until they've slaughtered all the Jews, and the Jews are hiding behind the rocks and the trees, and the rocks and trees are crying out, "Oh, Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, kill him." And except for the one tree that they say is the tree of the Jews. And that is quoted right within the actual Hamas charter from 1988.
Yeah.
So if people think that Hamas is there just to free their land, they are also 100% in line with the radical forms of Islam, which state that the Jews are enemies and to be destroyed, and that while there is no living in peace with the Islamists.
Right. And
So,
here is the line that Rob was just making reference to here. This is right out of the Hamas Charter. It says, the Prophet, Allah's prayer and peace be upon him, says, quote, "The hour of judgment shall not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them, so that the Jews hide behind the trees and stones, and each tree and stone will say, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him. Except for the Gakad tree, I'm not sure how to say it, Garkad tree, for it is the tree of the Jews." So it says recorded in the Hadith collections of Bukhari and Muslim. So that is a problematic doctrine, I would say.
Yeah, and those are the two most authoritative collections of hadiths in the Islamic world. So the Quran itself, it tells you that Muhammad is a perfect example of who to follow, and that I'll give you the exact verse here. It's chapter 33, verse 21, and it says, "In Prophet Muhammad, you have an excellent example for whoever has hope in Allah and the last day." Or in other words, if you want to see paradise, you will follow Muhammad and his example. Of course, the Quran itself doesn't give you his example of what he did or said, so you have to go to the hadiths, because a lot of the things that they have for their doctrine and practices come from the hadiths, because it's Muhammad's example. And the hatred for Jews especially is a big part of that. There is more anti-Semitism within the actual Islamic sources than you will find in Hitler's manifesto, Mein Kampf.
Yeah, I've seen Tommy Robinson. He's talked about that. I think he boils it down to something like Mein Kampf is about 4% anti-Semitism, whereas the Quran is about 12% anti-Semitism.
Somewhere around that.
Yeah.
Bill Warner does a really good talk about that.
Yeah, he's got a great channel there. He founded the Center for the Studies of Islam, I think it's called, and he's a PhD.
Yeah,
in
the
physics.
Center for the Study of Political Islam.
That's what it is, political Islam. He's a PhD in physics, so he can do pretty much whatever he wants, I guess. He's not, a theologian per se, but when you're a PhD in physics, I think you can probably manage a little theology.
Well, what he does is he brings the cold, hard facts to it. And facts don't care about feelings.
That is kind of, I hope, the spirit that everybody is coming into this conversation with. These are important conversations to have, and you know what? The important ones are never easy. And I was just looking here. It's in the. Here is your the line that you're talking about. Allah is its goal. The Prophet is his example to be followed, and Quran is the Constitution. So. That's like this is the kind of stuff. These are the beliefs that they hold, the leaders of Hamas hold, and have been indoctrinating people in Gaza into. Beliefs inspire actions. So, I think that it's important to kind of dive into. Well, of course, it's important to be able to criticize beliefs. That's why free speech is so important, because, if you just start from false premise, then you're gonna therein lies destruction. So we need to be able to challenge these kinds of ideas, it's a matter of survival, I think, in terms of civilizational survival. Anyway,
yeah, I forget who made the quote, but they said free speech is the most important of all of our freedoms in the world, because you can take away all other freedoms that we hold dear, and if you keep free speech, you can win all of your freedoms back.
Yeah. It's the first ditch from which we defend all other freedoms. It's with our freedom of speech. So, and I think it was Dave Chappelle who said that the Second Amendment is there in case the First Amendment doesn't work out. So,
unfortunately, in Canada, we do not have the Second Amendment, and there's I believe there's cases of where people have invaded a home and charged the homeowner for assault on the invader.
Crazy. Let me see. Shiloh is saying late Sergeant Major 20 done. Thanks, Shiloh, for letting me know, man. Good on yourself for owning it. And D Warren is saying, is Rob on X? Are you on X, Rob?
I am on X. I am not super active there. I do retweet things, but I don't do my own posts that often.
Oh, okay. Step into the fray, bro. We could use all the ideological wars we could get. And just
I am more active on Facebook. I am more active on Facebook, especially in the Islam versus Christianity debate groups. However, about a week ago, I must have upset somebody, and Fascist Book restricted me from making comments. So I've got about another week to go in Facebook jail.
I just got out of YouTube jail a little while ago. I did one stream like last night, and I got 3 warnings on it on my private channel. So I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out.
Well, in this day
just,
and age, if you haven't been in Facebook or YouTube jail at least once, you need to up your game.
Yeah, exactly. Get out there and practice some of that free speech while we still have it.
Radical candor.
Yes, sir. That's right. And on the, I was just thinking on the free speech point there. Okay, so we've got our charter here. There's our Hamas charter, and as we can see, it openly endorses violence, and it references the Quran throughout and the Hadiths throughout, and
throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. And so
it also references the genocide of through the river to the sea.
Okay.
Or from the river to the sea. It references that genocide. And every time you hear the big mobs of protesters on the pro-Palestinian side chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they are actually in contravention of the criminal code in public incitement of genocide and hate propaganda.
And which part of the criminal code?
Uh, 319, section 1 and 2, public incitement of hate and willful promotion of hatred. So 319.
Yeah, I'm just looking for 319. Oh, I don't see it in the table of contents there. That's weird.
318? Okay, yeah, it starts 318 and then it goes in there. I know it's there.
There's 318, but it doesn't look like the right one. Bear with us here, folks. Just a minute. But I know we've talked about this before here.
And then if you scroll down 19, you'll see it there.
Yeah, here we go. It says 319.1, everyone who, by communicating statements in any public place, incites hatred against an identifiable group where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace is guilty of... man, these links...
An indictable offense up to 2 years in prison. Yeah.
Yeah. Hate propaganda. Every person who advocates or promotes genocide is guilty of offense. Like I said, liable to imprisonment for a term not more than 5 years. Yeah, so then here's willful promotion of hatred. Everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is guilty of an indictable offense and is liable to imprisonment for a term of not exceeding 2 years, or an offense punishable by summary conviction. And I don't think that we're even really seeing any arrests out there for when it comes to this kind of stuff anyway, are we, Rob?
No, we're not. No, we're not. In fact, we're seeing more arrests of counter protesters than anyone else. And that's because the police do not have the resources to actually arrest the leaders of these protests, or because so what they do is they watch the counter protesters and they basically arrest them to keep them safe instead of arresting the agitators within the mob, because if that mob turns on the police, well, I don't think I need to explain it.
They're going to get overwhelmed.
in a real hurry. And unfortunately, it's probably not the nicest thing to say, but that needs to happen to the police so that they see who the actual bad guys are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not hard to tell, really. I say that all the time. It's not hard to tell who the bad guys are. They're the ones inciting genocide. So, and
then
just
you compare and contrast that with the how the RCMP looked at or treated the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, and more recently the carbon tax protesters.
Yes. Here's a good example of that. So this is a good compare and contrast here. Here's Concerned Canadian, and they say this is transpiring in downtown Toronto. Just think what the Trudeau Liberals would do if we held similar Christian prayer sessions in the streets. We would be attacked with police force. In addition, Trudeau wants no prayers or references to God November 11th. So yeah, Christianity is like the antithesis of Islam in this Marxist paradigm, the intersectional paradigm. Like I said, you've got those lines of antithetical lines, the antithetical proletariat, and so below the line of oppression is the Islamists, and they are to overthrow the Christianities, who is above the line of oppression. They're the bourgeoisie. But here is a scene from Toronto. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allah. So taking over the streets in Toronto to engage in prayer. And here's a tweet from Gacy, and he says, notice to demonstrators from the RCMP. Remember how it went down in Ottawa? Blue, red, Emergency Act, and violent removal. So he's retweeting this letter from the RCMP in Saskatchewan. It's
going back to the public prayer there.
Yeah. Well, just
going back to the public prayer, the prayers themselves are a religious act. Okay.
I was just going to show what they're saying here. It says, to avoid breaking the law, we ask that you refrain from disrupting road traffic, parking your vehicle on the side of any public roads, parking your vehicle in any private properties you do not have the approval to use by its legal owner, or obstructing or interfering with the use of any public or private property, roadways, or infrastructure on foot or vehicle. And the interfering with the use of public property is public or private property. I think that applies. That would be a mischief charge that goes along with that. Which is what they slapped on all of us at the convoy, and even though we weren't blocking traffic. And the disrupting road traffic is clearly in play as well. And you were just going to say something, I think, Rob, about the act of praying in the streets like this, huh?
Yeah, so the act of prayer itself is a religious act, and that is protected by the Charter. But the actual act of praying in the street, blocking the traffic, is a political action, and that is not protected by the Charter. And the distinction must be made. And unfortunately, the police do not enforce the criminal code as written, and instead they look at they believe it's, that they're praying that we can't disturb them. Meanwhile, they are blocking access to the roads. And if there was, let's say there was an ambulance or fire truck that had to get through there, well, they would have to wait until prayers were over. And it's a very common intimidation tactic that's used by the Islamists to show the people who's really in charge.
I tend to agree. We've seen this phenomenon many times before, like all over Europe, especially since the migrant crisis of 2015. This is kind of how it starts, and it eventually leads to, eventually they end up in a place where they have no-go zones and, grenade problems in Mozambique, Sweden, and terrorism and whatnot. So it's political Islam. Like you said, there's the religious act that's combined with a political act. But I would say political Islam is, well, Islamist is kind of the broad category, the banner under which they all fall. Everybody trying to reestablish the caliphate, and the political Islamists would be this variety, and then we have the jihadis, which engage in violence. So there's not, there's not nearly as many, obviously, that are willing to engage in violence, but it all kind of comes under the same umbrella of Islamism to restore the caliphate. Does that sound about right?
Pretty close. To the way I would define an Islamist is a person who would wish to implement Sharia law on all of society, and that's where political Islam comes in, because I believe that Islam in itself is a totalitarian political ideology, which means to dominate the world, and along with it is the religious component that we see as the face of it all.
Yeah, it's like they're all called to the struggle of jihad to bring the world under a global caliphate, or Sharia, as you say, and to bring it back to God. So that they believe that they're engaged in a kind of holy crusade. So it gets to be really difficult, I think, to engage and criticize when there's all this spirituality that's mixed in with what is fundamentally a political movement. They want to establish a certain style of government. So
yeah, and they actually define Islam as a deen, and that's an Arabic word which actually means it's a political way of life, first and foremost. And it, like most Arabic words, it's got about 20 different meanings. And it's not until you get down to meaning number 12 or 14 that religion starts to play into it.
Right.
So
I think
it all comes back to Islamophobia and how it's actually a made-up term from about the 1980s.
Yeah, I think it was Christopher Hitchens who said that it's a term invented, what is it? It's invented by fascists and used by cowards to manipulate morons. So the fascists are like the Organization of Islamic Countries.
That's very accurate.
Yeah.
The fascists that's very accurate.
Organization of Islamic Countries at the UN. And the cowards would be our politicians, and the morons would be us, the leftists.
So the term in particular was first coined in the 80s from the International Institute of Islamic Thought. They saw how the term homophobia was being used, and they thought, hey, why not use that to our purposes? Because anybody who's accused of being a homophobe, they're immediately canceled by the cancel culture. And it's worked to great effect with Islamophobia, because if you're accused of being an Islamophobe, well, the left takes over and you are canceled.
Yeah.
When in reality, a phobia is an irrational fear of something. And an Islamophobe is only a non-Muslim that knows too much about Islam.
Yeah, there are, their fears or their concerns, I guess, are well-founded. So that would not be an irrational.
And if a person actually takes a dive into the translations of the Islamic texts, you will see for yourself. And that is part of the reason why they hide behind the Arabic language, because only about 15% of all Muslims are native Arabic speakers. When they recite the Quran in Arabic, they're just making the sounds, and they don't actually understand what they're saying.
And they sing
and they rely on, it does sound like singing, but they rely on their sheikhs and imams to tell them what it actually means. And of course, they will spin it the way that they want for to spread Islam.
Mm-hmm. And I thought I'd throw this up there. I just thought of it real quick. It's a Pew Research poll. They asked a lot of different questions, but I just scrolled down to the section on support for Sharia, and it says percentage of Muslims who favor making Sharia the official law of their country. Southern Eastern Europe is pretty low. The strongest support is at 42%. That's in Russia. And I recall there was in the early 2000s, Russia went into Czechoslovakia there, and everybody was freaking out. But because they were saying certain rebels against, the Russian regime had taken over several buildings in Chechnya there. And what they didn't tell you in the Western media is that they were jihadis and they had captured these buildings and declared them to be part of the caliphate. So Russia's pretty familiar with this phenomenon. Central Asia rates are pretty low, 35% in Kyrgyzstan. Malaysia gets pretty high there. Southeast Asia, it starts getting up there. So Malaysia's at 86%. Thailand, 77%. Indonesia, 72% support for Sharia. And like I said, Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country. Afghanistan, it's at 99%. And just look at Afghanistan. I mean, if ever there was a shithole country, it has to be that country there. It's and I mean, I've been there. I mean, it is the arsehole of the world. It smells like an open sewer. So, and they're much worse off with that now that we pulled out.
And the Taliban is a Islamist fundamentalist group.
Yes, the Taliban, absolutely. Sorry, I just had a comment. Sherry said there's no Rumble. I seem to have the Rumble going just fine. So, yeah, hopefully you can sort that out. So as we can see, there are pretty high rates here.
There's a comment up there from X.
Which one?
Here, I'll bring up a comment here from Vlad. He's saying, Maldudi translation as recommended to Robert Spencer, Finsbury Park Mosque Imam. So that Imam, they actually called Captain Hook because he was building IEDs and one of them went off and he lost both of his hands. So all he had were the metal hooks. But the guy was mentioning was Robert Spencer. He had actually visited that mosque many years later, and one of the people had given him a copy of a Quran in English and Arabic, and the person who wrote it and gave the commentary was a guy named Maududi, and he was one of the actual founders of the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very mainstream. If you go into any Islamic bookstore, you will find his works.
Yeah, and Sherry over on Rumble says God is one consideration, but all religions worship a secondary person whose feet walked on earth. To my knowledge, everybody says their religion is the only one. Wars and death in order to be right. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything in the Bible or in the Torah that actually commands followers to wage war on the unbelievers.
Actually, if you go into the Talmud, you do find it, and every religion has their ugly scars. The difference within Christianity is that when Jesus came out with his teachings, he basically had said that the old Jewish covenant is no more, and we will follow the new covenant that he brought to earth.
Right. My understanding, though, and this is just, really, I guess it's more like an observation, but the commandments to wage war in the Old Testament were close-ended, where, say, for example, God commanded Joshua to exterminate the Amalekites in Jericho, and so he did it. But they conquered Jericho. There are no more Amalekites, so it's a moot point.
That's right.
At this stage in our history, that God commanded them to wage war because it was confined to that singular battle, whereas something like fight and kill the unbelievers wherever you meet them is an open commandment that still applies in the here and now.
And I'll go one step further on that, where it says, fight the unbeliever until religion is all for Allah. That makes it a pretty clear order.
And open-ended, right?
Like, very open-ended.
It's not confined to a particular time and space like Jericho. So
No,
that's
and
what I kind of see as the important distinction to make there, Sherry. But I appreciate the commentary.
And the Quran itself says it's for all people for all times.
Right. And it is the last and final revelation from the creator of the universe.
Yes.
And here is another example of this kind of two-tier justice here. We have Daisy is tweeting this out. This is from a while back. I think they've revised this chant first, or maybe we're just not hearing it right, but it sure sounds like Israel bombs, Canada burns. This is in Ottawa, just in front of the Prime Minister's office. Here we go.
How many times do we need to show up in front of a terrorist office to let it know?
That is Justin Trudeau's office being called a terrorist.
Say Trudeau! Israel bombs, Canada burns! How many times can you
It might be saying Israel pays, but it sure sounds like Israel bombs. I think that's what they're saying now is Israel pays. And what I pointed out at the time was that there is a section of the criminal code here. Hoax regarding terrorist activity, 83-231 says everyone commits an offense who without lawful excuse and with intent to cause any person to fear death, bodily harm, substantial damage to property, or serious interference with the lawful use or operation of property, conveys or causes or procures to be conveyed information that in all the circumstances is likely to cause a reasonable apprehension of terrorist activity, is occurring or will occur without believing the information to be true. So even without believing it to be true, it's still considered it's covered under the terrorist act, basically. And it says B, commits an act that in all circumstances is likely to cause a reasonable apprehension the terrorist activity is occurring or will occur without believing that such an activity is occurring or will occur. I don't and a lot of this stuff too, like when they're talking about intifada, they're calling for stuff like that. I've never known intifada to mean anything other than terrorism against Jews in particular. It seems that even if they don't really mean it, it is still an offense of the criminal code, at least as is my reading.
It really shows our two-tier justice system, because you see them calling for genocide and yet nothing is going on. And yet if you have Canadians who are protesting for Canadian freedoms, we get the jackboots of the RCMP in our faces.
Yeah, 100%. And Bill is saying, sorry, please read entire passage. I am a Muslim and you're discrediting yourself when you only quote part of the verse and conceal part. And I showed the Winston Churchill quote when we started off here, and he says that individual Muslims are perfectly capable of great things and lovely things and so on and so forth, but there's a movement itself. There are certain segments of it, at least, and they are rather substantial, as I just showed the polling data there in terms of the support for Sharia globally. It's not really me either that's interpreting these passages. I'm just kind of taking those who are interpreting them at their word. And here's a good clip show of the leaders of Hamas and various preachers for Hamas. And here's what they have to say. Sorry, I'll give the translation. It says, "O Allah, bring annihilation upon the Jews. Paralyze them, destroy their entity. O Allah, enable us to get the necks of the Jews. Allah, enable us to get the necks of the Jews. The day of your slaughter, extermination, and annihilation is near." It's another guy. Until not a single Jew or Zionist is left on the face of the earth. There's another guy. Our doctrine in fighting you, the Jews, is that we will totally exterminate you. We will not leave a single one of you alive. And here's a good one. The Quran says, quote, kill them wherever you may find them. We will fight them wherever we can. There's another guy. The moment.
So one thing you'll notice is that they're all saying this in Arabic.
Yes. He says the moment will come when their property will be destroyed and their sons annihilated. Oh Allah, destroy the Jews and their supporters. Oh Allah, destroy the Americans and their supporters. Oh Allah, count them one by one. Kill them all without leaving a single one. They're praying. They're actually they're praying for that. So yeah, I mean, I am not purporting to be any kind of theologian but when people tell you who they are, I say,
and they're famous for saying one thing in Arabic. Yeah, they're famous for saying one thing in Arabic and then the complete opposite in English.
Yeah, and there is a widely recognized principle in the Islamic world known as taqiyya, which is the deliberate deception, it's a deception for the purpose of furthering the cause of jihad.
Actually, it goes farther than that. Okay. Within Sharia law, if you go to Reliance of the Traveler, it's divided into different books, but if you go to book R 8.2, it actually states cases where it's permissible to lie. And there's three main times. One of them is to smooth out a disagreement, like as in a husband and wife. Another one is to end a debate. And the third part is in time of war. And as we know, Islam is in a perpetual state of war against the unbeliever.
Mm-hmm. And what was the book again, just for everybody's reference?
It's called Reliance of the Traveler. It's probably one of the most recognized manuals of Sharia in the world.
Okay. And that is one that I am not even familiar with there, folks. So props to you, Rob, for being on top of all this stuff. Well, I mean, we have, we just saw there's a lot of this activity in the streets of Canada now, and it traces its way back to Hamas. Here is something, just a reminder, I reported on this before, but Andy Lee did some digging into some of these larger events. And she's tweeting out here. She says, Samaduan has built a powerful network using nonprofit status in Canada to fund these protests. It's very disturbing that they are permitted to fundraise in Canada. So this Samaduan is something that I've been showing here a little bit. And she's saying here, answers for you in screenshots. So she's got all the screenshots lined up here for, here's all the different collaborators for Samaduan, Toronto for Palestine, for example. Here they're soliciting for donations. And so they're fundraising in Canada. This is for 150 days of genocide. Samaduan Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network in Canada. And here are all these different chapters that are affiliated. This is all across Canada. There's a whole bunch of them.
So this is actually starting to get into where I first started following Tom Quiggin here, where he's talking about financing of terrorism. And 83.02 in the Criminal Code talks specifically about financing of listed terrorist entities, which Hamas is in Canada. So any of those groups that are supporting Palestine are supporting the quote unquote democratically elected government of Palestine, which is Hamas.
Yeah.
And therefore they are supporting a known listed terrorist entity. And even if the money is not being directed specifically towards terrorist acts, if it's indirectly supporting, let's say it's going to a school that Hamas normally funds, well, by funding that school that Hamas normally funds, now Hamas has that amount of money which can be used to support their terrorism.
Right.
And one of the 5 pillars of Islam is what they call zakat. And it's like a tithe in the Christian world.
Okay.
And a part of that money goes to fund jihad. So every single mosque in Canada is actually funding jihad.
Every single one?
Every single one, because zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. In order to be a practicing Muslim, you have to do the 5 pillars, which are the Shahada, so that's the declaration that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, zakat, fasting during Ramadan, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and the 5th one is the 5 times daily prayers.
Okay. And the donations, though, do they necessarily go to funding terrorism, or can it be some other form of activism?
Well, it can be to any type of Islamic charity that they choose.
Okay.
But the Quran itself says that those who fund or support the jihadis are also guaranteed the same rewards as the jihadis who kill or are killed in the name of Allah.
Right. And they are martyrs and held in the highest esteem and get fast track to paradise. Martyrdom is like a core value in jihad. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yes.
Here's an interesting little tidbit here, I think, that demonstrates the intersectional alliance to which I'm referring here. Anti-imperialist alliance. And that's what they call us. They call, the United States imperialist, and they call Israel imperialist. It says, we are a group of people united in opposition and resistance to Canadian and U.S. imperialism in the Turtle Island and internationally. Follow us on social media. Okay, so Turtle Island, I believe, is what they're calling the continent of America, and it's like a reference to indigenous tribes. And I think that this is another thing that they're doing, is they're trying to radicalize the indigenous tribes against European people of European descent and the common law jurisdictions that we have here on Turtle Island, apparently. And that's part and parcel, I think. Well, it's basically the Black Lives Matter that took place in the United States never really took hold in Canada the way that they might have hoped, and so they seem to be going after the indigenous populations with the same kind of radicalism. And here is she's got this encyclopedia of anti-revisionism online. Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, anti-imperialist alliance courageously counters fascist attacks. So that's who the anti-imperialist alliance is. They are the part of the Communist Party of Canada. All out against fascism is, the fascism rhetoric is straight out of the Marxist playbook from the Frankfurt School that I mentioned. Anybody who stands up to the Marxist takeover, they just call them a fascist. And the bottom line is here, guys, that these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they fundraise in Canada, and they funnel money back to Hamas. They're Hamas affiliated, and they use a lot of the funds that they raise essentially to project force on behalf of Hamas in the form of these influence operations. We're all funding it. And don't forget about UNRWA. We send money to UNRWA, which funds Hamas as well. And we do that with our tax dollars. We don't even have a choice in it.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Yeah. Here is the NCCM. That's the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Used to be called CARE-CAN, which everybody knows
National
is
Council of Canadian Muslims.
Yeah. It used to be called CARE-CAN, but everybody is aware that CARE-CAN is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood these days, so they changed their name. They are retweeting. This is the VP of CIJA, so that's the Canadian Israeli Jewish Association. So they're retweeting him, and they're saying, we aren't even going to begin to unpack the ridiculous ahistoricisms happening here. It's shocking that the General Counsel and VP of CIJA is choosing to pit Islam and Judaism against each other in a tweet that targets Muslims in a way that is both divisive and harmful. NCCM continues to believe that we must stand together in Canada and abroad to fight for peace, equality, and safety for all. And they're retweeting Richard Marceau, who says, hard to think of a better example of settler colonialist movement than the spread of Islam. Hard to find a better example of indigeneity than Jews who bear the same name, Israel, speak the same language, Hebrew, and worship the same God as 3,000 years ago in their ancestral lands. So I think he's kind of pointing back to the Crusades, not the Crusades, but the jihadi wars, I guess, the encroachment into Europe that goes all the way back to the 7th century.
Yeah, he's I would say that his last tweet that you had there references back to the Balfour Declaration and the Jewish mandate for or the British mandate for Palestine at the end of World War II. And when that happened, they had the land was divided up, and the Arabs got about 2/3 of it, or 3/4, and the Jews got 1/4. The Arabs got the country which today is called Jordan, and the Jewish state of Israel was born. And what it was is the Arab leadership told all of the Arabs to get out of Israel, and then we had the what was it, the 5-day or 7-day war, where all of the Arab countries surrounding Israel attacked, and the brand new nation, and the Israelis pushed them all out, and even conquered the whole of the Sinai Peninsula and Golan Heights and entire West Bank. And that's where but because they don't say that it was the Muslim or Arab population or leadership that told the guys to get out of the country. This way they can use their victim mentality, drive them out from where they drove you out, and claim their legitimacy for the land.
Yeah,
because there is no two-state solution.
Well, I don't think they want a two-state solution. I don't think that's what it's about. That's
no, it's not.
That's just the kind of distraction, I think. Really, it's from the river to the sea. They want to wipe Israel and the Jews off the face of the earth.
The river is the Jordan River, and the sea is the Mediterranean. And that's actually listed in the Hamas charter as well.
Yes, it is. And I've seen some pretty great clips out there of people like just walking up to leftists and saying, "Oh, from the river to the sea, huh? Like which river and which sea?" And do you think they can answer?
Yeah,
no.
They have no idea.
Yeah, but all this anti-Westernism is quite trendy right now. And you mentioned that during the 6-day war, the Israelis conquered the Sinai Peninsula. And I find that one fact alone really kind of does more than any other to falsify this narrative of, the Israelis as conquerors, colonizers, and this kind of thing. It's not about land for them. They conquered the Sinai Peninsula that is currently part of Egypt. So it's a bigger territory than Israel itself. And it's also oil rich and is right on the Suez Canal. So huge strategic value, resources, economic value, all kinds of stuff. And they gave it back. They gave it back to Egypt in exchange for peace. If it was really all about oppressing Muslims and conquering land, then that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. And there's four other cases in history where they were offered land. The last one being in the 1997 era, which is when the Gaza and the West Bank was actually born and given under to Palestinian rule. And the only thing that we've seen out of Gaza is that it's been used as a almost as a military base to launch terror attacks from.
Yeah, it's effectively a terror state.
Yeah. And this war is ideological, in my opinion. And you don't fight an ideological war with bombs and bullets. You need a different ideology to replace the weak one, or evil one in this case.
And here is another, I think, pretty good example of this intersectionalism and how we have this Islamunism on our hands now. This guy's retweeting, I guess his name is Hezbollah. I don't really know who he is. And he's talking about Israel being a racist, genocidal, settler, colonial project. So there you go. I mean, that's all.
Between Lord Balfour and this Jewish millionaire by the name of Rothschild, they decided that it was okay to take somebody else's country and give it to the Jews. This was a world where you could do things like that. People who were white and European could take the countries of people who were brown and not European and do as they will. And basically, that's what the Balfour Declaration is. One white racist promising another white racist somebody else's country. Between Lord Balfour.
What do you have to say about that there, Rob? We see kind of all the same tropes in every Marxist narrative, that it was all about racism and, these evil white people that are just looking for brown people to push around. But as you were saying, Rob, this guy's saying that these white racists took somebody's country and gave it to some other white racists. Any comments on the claim that there was a country there that's been captured by the Jews?
Actually, I would argue against that, because you go back 3,000 years, and according to the Bible anyway, the Jews were promised the land of Israel, and the Quran actually corroborates that, the children of Israel and their land, Judea, Sumeria, and I forget the other part, but I guess if anything, it goes back. But because the Bible is being erased from our culture, and Christianity is slowly being erased, it's people just don't know that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And my understanding too is that the territory that is now Israel was once Transjordan. And I remember King Hussein, I think it was, of Jordan, who said that Jordan is Palestine, Palestine is Jordan. Once upon a time, it was Jordanian territory, and that was another British mandate after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire that I keep referencing here, because
that was the Ottoman Empire. That was going back to the Balfour Declaration.
Yeah, and the Ottoman Empire collapsed after joining World War I on the Axis power side, like I said. And so the British went around trying to establish these different mandates in order to stabilize the region, because it was lawless and without a government, a functioning state. And so that's how we ended up with a lot of different borders being drawn in the Middle East, and even in the Far East, where we have Pakistan used to be part of India, yeah, they found these different families, royalty, that kind of thing, to run these countries. And Jordan, I think, is the Hashemite kingdom.
Yes.
And so the Hashemites have been ruling there. And in fact, like, they are the ruling tribe, but everybody else is effectively Palestinian ethnically.
The actual official name is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
Yeah. And so it was once part of Jordan. It was never, like, Palestinia is the name the Romans gave it after they crushed the Jewish state in the first century.
That's right.
So yeah, that was for the
Palestina.
purpose of breaking the Jewish connection to the land. And I just had a comment. I think I'll go ahead and address it here, but Pila was saying, give your head a shake, Jeff. Neither side wants a two-state solution. Otherwise, the war machine stops making money. Well, yeah, this is a very common narrative. But what I'll say about this, like, say for the claim that all wars are bankers' wars, for example. Well, what came first, wars or banks? I mean, I'm pretty sure that wars existed long before we had banks. So war, I think, is just part of the human condition. And it would be the case that the military-industrial complex would make money regardless of the cause of the war, because we have to buy equipment and manufacture and ammunition and all kinds of stuff like this. So if we got attacked and had to spin up the war machine, then it would look the same as it does right now, with certain companies making money for supplying equipment. And here, this went down over the weekend.
And the Rothschild family has been funding both sides of every war.
Yeah, they have, but I find it's specious to say that they are the cause of the war by funding it. I think they make money off it, but there would be wars regardless of whether anybody was making money or not. And it used to be the case that we funded wars.
If you look back towards if you look back towards American history, at least, it was the Second World War that brought the States out of the Great Depression.
Yeah, that's true. I was just going to say that it used to be the case that the way we funded wars, the way we paid our soldiers, was with booty. I mean, soldiers would take booty whenever they conquered an area. That was the case for India, for example. So this method of paying soldiers salaries and going to banks to fund the wars in advance, as opposed to with the booty that you take, it's a new model, but I mean, I think it's an improvement over the old one, where they borrow money and sell war bonds to finance these things, as opposed to robbing the country that we go to war with. So those are kind of the options that are out there. You can rob countries, or you can borrow money from the banks. So it seems to me that that's an improvement. But here, this went on over the weekend, and it says the world united against genocide in Gaza, Al-Quds Day. So that was going on Sunday, April 7th, Al-Quds Day. I've shown some footage from some of the different protests and whatnot. What do you know about Al-Quds, Rob?
Al-Quds, that's the actual Islamic name that they give to the city of Jerusalem.
Okay.
So I'm not an expert on that, but the Islamic claim to Jerusalem, I believe, has to deal with the Miraj, which is the mythical night journey that Muhammad took from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, which they believe is on the Temple Mount, although there's no way that was historically accurate, because it was still in Jewish hands at the time. And that's why they put the Dome of the Rock on basically the ruins of the Second Temple, basically to claim it. And if you look at the only original parts of the Dome of the Rock that are still standing, the inscriptions are on there are all against Christianity.
Interesting. And my understanding too is that the Al-Quds Day is something that was started by the Iranian regime that's intended to show support for the Palestinian resistance, quote unquote.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the militant wing of the IRGC is known as the Al-Quds Force, and that was Qasem Soleimani's force. Yeah, this appears to be a kind of anti-Israel day, I think.
Yeah, here, I'll try to get this up. There we go. Iran created the idea of Al-Quds, and Al-Quds Day is 100% an Iranian invention. There we go.
Yeah, yeah, that is my understanding as well. That's what's going on in Canadian cities right now. And here you have more quote unquote not terrorists, close quote, in Toronto. This is Jack, and he's showing the the banner people are holding up. It says "Long live the resistance," and you've got an AK on the poster with the Hamas flag on the butt of the rifle. And at the bottom, we see Samadoun Toronto. So that would be that NGO that funds a lot of this stuff. So, and they're allowed to fundraise here in Canada. So that's what's happening. And here is Andy Lee tweeting out occupation of MP Fragistakos office. So I guess this is another, this is what they're up to here. What is the date for this one? So this was a couple of months ago, but it says, she says, backed by the Samadoun network, who was granted nonprofit status despite being banned in allied countries, the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada is planning to occupy Liberal MP Peter Fragistakos office on Wednesday. You are going to want to stay home that day. She's telling Peter. Yeah, Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, like I was showing you there before, supporting a lot of this stuff. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I think people are finally starting to wake up to the fact that this wokeism is going to be the death of the West if we don't turn this around.
And this is a great article by General Rick Hillier in the National Compost.
Yeah, this is quite good. I'll give it a read here if I can. It's not too long. It says title is General Rick Hillier, ideology masking his leadership killed the Canadian dream. Enough of the gaslighting, evading, blaming, and deluding. Canada needs to be made ours again. That is a pretty strong statement. Well done, General Hillier. Quote, this is not Canada, close quote, is a phrase we hear far too often. It seems to come from every politician from all levels. It's exclaimed it's exclaimed after every illegal demonstration, hate crime, block street, gang shooting, home invasion, car theft, and emergency room horror story. Those exclamations ring hollow as food banks lines stretch longer and as hopeless thousand-yard stares of good men and women grow more prevalent. While dreams of home ownership fade, shantytowns grow, and our confidence in our future plummets. We hear the official inflation rate, but it bears little resemblance to our real-life experience. Quote, this is not Canada, close quote, grates harshly, especially when it comes from those who seem so out of touch with reality. The Canadian dream, so wonderfully launched in 1867 with the partnership that was the Dominion of Canada, is dead. Killed by ideology masking as leadership, slaughtered by economic suicide posing as climate control, bled by crushing taxes wasted on scandalous and foolish endeavors, crushed by debt that comprises long-term fiscal viability compromises, wounded by battles over responsible care for children, frightened by our abandonment of some 300,000 Canadians, attacked not because they are bombing Gaza, but because they're Jews. Coupled with increasing brain drain, capital flight, and failing infrastructure, we face a harsh reality. The great experiment, the Federation of Like-Minded Peoples that was the Dominion of Canada, is failing. Our responses are feeble. More regulations, more higher taxes, massive amounts of immigration without a plan to integrate. Decrying American politics without acknowledging that our dirty politics are homegrown with leaders dividing instead of uniting. Thinking of former Governor General Julie Payette, who, as head of state, mocked religious Canadians by complaining that, quote, we are still debating and still questioning whether life was a divine intervention or whether it was coming out of a natural process, let alone, oh my goodness, a random process, close quote. Our leaders missed a truly inspirational opportunity during the COVID pandemic to form a, quote, war cabinet, close quote, to combat the enemy attacking our nation. Just as the United Kingdom's Winston Churchill did in 1940, in the face of another brutal enemy, we could perhaps have risen above the fray of partisan politics in our darkest hour. We did not. The cure for what ails us is simple to say, but difficult, perhaps impossible to implement. Leadership. I've been saying it's a leadership crisis, folks. Real leaders have a vision for what we can be, a strategy to get there, a plan to execute the strategy, and priorities to get things done daily. Those who wish to be political leaders should articulate what their leadership will mean and how it will function, including how it would hold the public service accountable for delivering priorities under the plan. Equally crucial to a leader's vision is the economy. In the federal domain, any strategy should consider how to unfetter and inspire a private sector that delivers transformational technology, investment opportunity, well-paid employees, and a hope for a better future. Underscoring all of this should be a rethink of how and how much we tax. Canadians are tired of, quote, tax and spend, close quote, policies. Canada should also have a plan to develop rather than to dismantle its energy sector. Climate change is real. The country must stop committing economic suicide as a solution, however. Instead, leaders should work with Indigenous peoples to produce the cleanest, safest, most ethical LNG to power the world. Canadian LNG can replace coal for power generation throughout much of Asia and the rest of the world, reducing global carbon emissions by millions of tons while creating massive economic benefits for Canadians. Our contribution and leadership to combat climate change should be enormous, not ludicrous. Last on this incomplete list is the empowering of personal ambition, initiative, and ingenuity. Deregulate, remove red tape, and stop being an obstacle. Our current housing crisis, our inability to dream of owning a home, can be traced in large part to the red tape and taxes with which we have handicapped both builders and buyers. It all starts with with responsible leadership. We have succeeded in tough times before. As Canada's Prime Minister during the First World War, Sir Robert Borden led through a brutal conscription crisis. During the Second World War, then Prime Minister Mackenzie King became a powerful influencer to two of the greatest leaders ever, Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt, shaping the world to Canada's advantage. And that's a little known fact, folks, is that we do have the, what's it called? I think it's called the War Measures Act in Canada. Anyway, we can draft people. Strong prime ministers continue to strengthen the nation in decades that followed. Lester B. Pearson in the 60s, Brian Mulroney in the 80s and 90s, and ruthless Jean Chrétien in the 90s into the early 2000s. We need that leadership now. Enough of the gaslighting, evading, blaming, and diluting. The mission is clear. Make this our Canada. Wow. Well done, Rick Hillier. That's some pretty powerful words.
Yeah, very powerful letter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what he said about Canadian LNG is correct. If Canada was to export LNG to the world, the resulting reduction in emissions would be equal to taking every single internal combustion vehicle off Canadian roads.
Wow. Yeah, you know what? That is a pretty powerful statistic too. Really bottom lines it. Really powerful kind of statement there. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Let me see. Lola say climate change is real. Yeah, it's real, but is it human caused is really the question, right? Okay, so good stuff on the part of
I would say that climate change is real, but it's a natural cycle, and there's nothing that humans can do or not do to change that.
Yeah. 1,000%. All right. So with that brings us all the way up to the Veterans for Freedom website, everybody. You can subscribe to our newsletter by clicking subscribe here, join Veterans for Freedom by clicking join here, or support us here. Donate directly to us to help with our operational costs by clicking donate, or click support to donate to the support fund that we use to help Canadians who are suffering under this tyranny. You can sign up for a monthly subscription with your credit card by clicking one of the buttons here. And if you don't want to use your credit card, please send your e-transfer to fund@veteransforfreedom.ca. That's fund@veterans4freedom.ca, preferably with the auto deposit enabled. But if you're not able to do that, please use the password fund for freedom. That's all caps fund, 4, all caps freedom. And we'll make sure that gets off to a worthy cause. Last month's winner was Kerry Sakamoto, who everybody should know was pretty severely injured by the vaccine and now has Bell's palsy like symptoms. So she was quite happy to receive that donation and did a very wonderful thank you video when she received it. All right, that brings us all the way back to Winston Churchill. He says, individual Muslims may show splendid qualities, but the influence of the religion paralyzes the social development of those who follow it. No stronger retrograde force exists in the world. I bet you guys didn't know that that Winston Churchill was an Islamophobe. Hey. So, Rob, I'll throw it to you for a final thought here before we sign off, brother. Go ahead.
All right. So one of the things that people always think of is those who criticize Islam are against Muslims. I have no problem with Muslims who want to practice their faith. My problem is Islam and the ideology behind it. And just like criticizing communism, fascism, Marxism, Islamism is another political ideology to criticize, and it's protected under Section 2B of the Charter. However, because of our current leadership, and especially for those in the forces, the charter is only applied where it is convenient to the institution. And we need to stand up again and reclaim our rights, or else we will never get them back again without bloodshed. And with that, I'll wish everyone a great evening and keep your head on a swivel.
Amen to that. And I think that we had the right approach in the West when we separated church and state. But more broadly, I think it's appropriate to separate religion and politics. And when we talk about Islamism, we're talking about that kind of melding together of the spirituality with the political movements. And so that is the kind of thing that we need to separate out. If it were just the spirituality, then we wouldn't be talking about this. So that is the distinction I think that we should be careful to draw. It's between the Islamism and Islam. Now, Islam, of course, there are doctrines and whatnot, tenets that are worthy of criticism, and that should be open to criticism like every other ideology. But the main concern here is the politicization of that spirituality. I think that really needs to be addressed most urgently. Yes, sir. All right. So with that, everybody, thanks very much for joining us. Serena's here saying, very interesting conversation. Thank you, Jeff and Rob. Good evening, all. Thank you, Serena, for being with us. And Patricia's here saying, sorry, but you can't call Trudeau a leader. April is saying, thank you, Jeff and Rob. A very insightful interview. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Cindy says, good night, Jeff. Hearts. Nice to see you, Rob. It's nice to see you again, Rob, and giving us the victory. Night all. And Canada Goose is saying, I'll have to rewatch later. I got here late. Okay, well, you owe me 20 push-ups, though. But that's okay. You can watch it later. And Dwayne is over there saying, thanks, Ben. Have a good night, all. And Amazing Faces says, another great show. Thanks, Jeff and Rob. Yes, thank you all very much for staying with us. These are the kinds of difficult but important conversations that we need to have, of course. So till next time, stay frosty and stay safe.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Damn ocean songs.